Hey gang, welcome back. It is I, DrBossKey, and today we're talking about something super special. So I've been kicking this around for a long time, and I thought I would first do the art feedback, and then maybe give you a little tiny bit of backstory, kind of how this became into what it is. So why don't we jump on over? But first, the thing we're going to talk about is I'm contemplating either for Interstellar Sentinel, the first game, to change the ship. Ideally, someday we'll be able to have player selection, so you can change your different types of characters and have different abilities and ship choices. It would be awesome. It would be super cool. We don't quite have that yet, but I can see a world where it would be the case. And in lieu of that, though, we've been already planning and thinking about our next game, and our next game is going to take place in essentially a mega city. And it's a dystopic neo noir, cyberpunk inspired world where main character is Gressel. He's a kind of cybernetic werewolf thing. That's a different story. But the main thing is that in the main motif for the enemies, and I started kind of riffing on this in the game before we pulled them out of this one, is to do bioorganic mechs. So both machinery. You still have a bit of that demonic riffing and kind of like supernatural essence that I really enjoy. But it's in essence, it's going to be you fighting a bunch of mechs. And in this time, instead of being in your ship, the Starveil Piercer, you are going to be flying, very Death Smiles kind of inspired. So you're going to be a character, still going to be a shmup and all the good stuff. But I've been really wanting to do this, and I think we have a path to doing this. So anyways, that was a little preamble. Yeah. All right, Dimitri, I really like the explorations, so thank you. So I think I'm just gonna pretty quickly here just kind of go over what I'm really enjoying. So I think, when I think about this, right, and we probably come on over here. Bloop. So in terms of the sprite sheet and how we're gonna put all this thing together, where did I put my attachments? Is it? Here we go. Sheet layout here. Tooch. Yeah. Okay, cool. So here we basically have banking animation, right? So so we have the cool part is we have default neutral when you're not pressing on the stick at all. And then you have to the right and to the left. And so what I think I want to do, I'm going to talk about this perspective, is we'll have kind of this nice natural, like very superhero esque, that while he has wings from the Larkin wingsuit, Larkin is essentially his living lab cloak. He's hence DrBossKey. The reality is it's not mechanical flight. I know, Dimitri, that hurts your your hydroengineering brain. I'm sorry. It's magical flight. It just is. The wings aren't super mechanically inclined. It's kind of like, sort of like take a little riff from Spawn, right? Like the cloak is its own like living entity, right? And so it's a little bit more of that. So anyways, I digress, but this is what I'm thinking about when we talk about this, right? So so in that case, I think I really enjoy overall. I'm enjoying this for kind of the idle, right? I think that we could probably space out the legs just a little bit, right? Just a tiny bit, not a ton. And I think you did a good job. Like here, these legs feel great. For, I think, this is like maybe either the final frame or the in-between frame. The in-between frame pretty much is just one tween frame for like that motion, right? And I think that's kind of what I'm thinking, right? So we have an idle here. We'll go into the details in a second. And then you have this can either be the frame number 2, or it could be frame number 3. But I think frame number 3 probably needs to be more exaggerated. So where we pull the hips back a little bit. We pull not the hips back. We pull the legs back a little more, right? We get a more forward lean on the chest, not too much. And then, you kind of get a little bit more of this maybe for like kind of that silhouette. wings I think flare back a little bit more. So this might be like the tween frame. So, and the wings are going to have motion, don't get me wrong. And they might even have like in the idle, they might flap quite a bit, you know, because it's like magic characters that don't need to breathe. They still sometimes go through the motions of breathing just because it's physical, even though they don't need to do it. Weird logic, but that's kind of what we're going with. So, and then we can work a little bit more on the head pose and what that looks like, and these pieces here. So that in the gist. So definitely not thinking anything in terms of this kind of flight. Now, there could be someday maybe where we actually have a version where he's just straight up in the Superman flight pose. Maybe we have some like very fast racing levels, but in the context of the game currently, I'm not thinking this, but I do like that. So, all right. And then, yeah, so let me think here. So with the idol, I'm kind of thinking like we take a page from like the Lesser Demon book, right? So, Lesser Demon. So yeah, so we got little flappy bits here. I really like it's just one strong, like I thought we did a fantastic job really hitting these frames, right? So, and I'm thinking like when he's in the idle, we can have this whoosh, whoosh, right? But for the most part, it's one frame that covers and then comes back. So a lot of that motion is carried from the bigger silhouette, and then you have the transition frames, and then just one frame that kind of comes over the front of the body. So that's what I was thinking there. So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. We can kind of figure out with the wings and kind of having this kind of flap, right? So also, I think we need to work on our arm positioning, but you know, it's not too bad. I think that we just need to go and start to take a look a bit more at what kind of a strong badass idol pose. He's definitely got his chest kind of puffed out here, which I like. His chin is a little bit down. So we might go with maybe more of a chin up if we're going to go with that more poof. I think you're starting to capture in the sketch what the flight suit looks like, which I'm really enjoying. And then we'll figure out with, I think the, again, like what the arm positioning looks like. I think this isn't bad by any measure. This actually might be very, very good. I like that you have the arms kind of back. So, but it's something we can play with. So overall, we're good there. And then I think the next piece of this too, right, is it's going to be tough, I think, I think what we're going to wind up having is that when, let's see here. And I think I put this in here. So 2. So when I did the, oh, we're in the wrong spot. So I did a very crude mock-up here, right? So also for scale, because DrBossKey isn't going to be huge. You know, the world is much bigger than DrBossKey's. DrBossKey fighting kaiju, right? So, but we have kind of like this nod to, you know, to essentially to like Gradius, right? Where we have these options. We're going to have some weaponry orbs, and those weaponry orbs, they're going to be basically very similar in the same positioning as the current starship, because I don't want to break the gameplay we built around that, but basically he has these orbs that he then uses his weapons from. So both the middle and what that looks like. So we need to think about a cool integrated way for this, but I think these things are going to be like, for the most part, they while he moves, these can have a little bit of like idle motion, but they don't move dramatically based on the animation, right? So, but what that means, right, is that when we're thinking about these, you know, like these Orbeez, whoops, take a look here. We don't need to do a whole lot, right? We just, hello, I am a squiggly orb. I'm a squiggly orb. Okay, cool. So yeah, so when we think about these, I don't even think he needs to necessarily touch them, but they're very important for, I think, the player to sort of understand where these are at. So when we think about the animations, you should already start sketching up, I think, these like battle drone orbs, right? And I think we've been more biomechanical in our space. There's a couple other things. I'll let you riff on that, but these are very important for us to consider when we think about the animations. Okay. And then some of this too is also just understanding, I think, I think you've got a good understanding impression for the wings here. And if this winds up being this is probably a tween frame, so we'll need that third frame where he's leaning forward more, and I think the wings probably they probably come back more. We can work through that. So bullets only impact basically his secret spots, or his secret spot, his secrets. Don't get hit the secret spot, boys and girls. Jesus. All right. I think the other thing that I haven't talked about a little bit here is, essentially we're gonna have a little sparkly in the suit, probably, like where the chest is, maybe here in the center. I'm probably something like that. And this is going to be this is essentially in the starship, right? Like when we talk about, and I kind of showed it here too, right? Where I'm not quite sure where we're going to put it, but, I just basically took a very crude version. So this is the vulnerability spot, in the Star Veil Piercer starship, right? So this is also sort of like the heart spot. This is the vulnerability point, right? So it's going to be bright, it's going to glow, it's going to be gem-like, I think. So, and I think that, that's part of what we need to do is incorporate that into our suit design too. I think, and then, Death Smiles is definitely our mod here. I think they did a fantastic job. Fantastic game. One of my favorite shmups. I really need to spend more time playing this game. I've beaten it a few times, but I haven't 1CC'd it. So, but anyways, I digress. So I think that's the round of feedback, to think about those frames. And that's enough to get us going. So, I'm excited. I think it's a little bit bigger project here. And then, okay, so let me stop there. Dimitri, that's the feedback. You can also, you can watch more of the video if you want, but, let me then talk to the rest of you about DrBossKey. So once upon a time, there was this dude named DrBossKey, and DrBossKey is basically, he's a hero, right? And he's got a bit of that Mega Man flavor story where he basically was summoned, kind of plucked out of his timeline. He was just a normal adventurer, and he's kind of not a full-on field adventurer. He really liked science, so he really enjoyed, like, he had some of that Pokemon fever, right? Where he was like, oh, every time he caught a new monster, he really wanted to understand why, like, what was the essence of the monster? How could it do what it could do? What were the magical essences of this monster itself, right? So it kind of became why part of his hero name is DrBossKey, right? And when he got plucked out of time by this goddess, her name was Lara, there's a cosmic war afoot that spans many different galaxies and across the universe, and also sometimes some of these galaxies are out of phase with ours, and so she gives him two things. One, she gives him she gives us technically three things. So she gives him a mission, right? And she's like, basically, what's happening is that in the balance of the galaxy, there are cases where it can be good, like angels, or it could be evil, like demons, right? And anytime these realms became out of balance, so evil starts just crushing good, and there's no more balance. Like then what happens is this amassment of power becomes so condensed that it starts to make a shift across the cosmos, because the cosmos as a whole also has its own balance with its own pantheon of deities and entities and and all kinds of things. But I don't want to tell you the whole thing, but that's the kind of essence of it. So the other thing she gives him, aside from his mission, she gives him the Soul Keyblade. And the Soul Keyblade is essentially his sword. And this thing is a crazy relic. And what it does is that when DrBossKey is summoned to balance the realm, he generally has to hunt out the source of that imbalance. And usually, no surprise, it winds up being a boss monster, right? Very video gamey, right? But some kind of entity that essentially is just dominating the realm. And so what happens is DrBossKey and that boss, they do battle. And DrBossKey is charged with rebalancing. So when he defeats the boss, the boss's essence, it's both its flesh and its body and its soul essence, break down, and the soul key blade winds up transforming by absorbing the essence of the boss monster, and then the soul key blade reconfigures itself into a new type of weapon. And these are considered living weapons or living entities. So the spirit and the consciousness of these monsters then are infused into the weapon. So there's still this relationship with them. DrBossKey can actually have interactions with them. And now he has these tools to help balance the cosmos, right? And this can be sometimes good, gets a little too like cocky and kicks the butt out of bad, and and it goes the other way. So it's not necessarily skewed in either way. It's very, very trying to be very yin yang, very trying to find that balance, right? And so Alara gives him his quest. She gives him the soul key blade, and then she gives him essentially the mental construct to conjure forth the Hall of Doors. And this is an interdimensional doorway where it's like one long hallway with doors on each of them. And you can peek through the doors to see these different realms. And this is how, when he's summoned, he comes into this place, and then he's drawn to his next mission. So these are the three things she gave him. DrBossKey, along all of those missions, has of course formed relationships, defeated boss monsters. There's all kinds of extra stuff. The essence of the game is built within this story realm, right? So, and I thought I would share that with you, because now one of the things that happened with DrBossKey is that he has essentially this living lab cloak, which is Larkin. And Larkin was a creature long ago. And here's the Larkin form, right? And it's absolutely pretty crazy that I have so many cool things in here, and it's going to take forever to make them. Come on, you can do this, or whatever. Let's do this. So this is Larkin, and Larkin was essentially he was the soul of an adventurer, a paladin adventurer that was essentially defeated by Gondas. You know Gondas, he's the main villain, Gondas Aneda from Interstellar Sentinel. And basically the short version is that Larkin became like a front guard for Srivis and the world. So DrBossKey defeats Larkin and then breaks down Larkin into basically an artifact. It's not always a weapon. In this case, Larkin becomes his companion, and it becomes basically his living lab cloak, right? So that was the version of this, and then Larkin gets defeated, and that's why DrBossKey has his living lab cloak, right? So, and that's why there's also the eyes here, because he's a little bit more pronounced. It's very monsterly with the teeth and a little beefy, right? Like, we had a lot of fun making these. And so now you have that backstory. And then the cool part is we got battle stances, because, I love fighting games, right? So the DrBossKey universe and pantheon of characters could easily be a fighting game as well, right? Not going to say never. Very could be that. Could be shmups, could be fighting games, could be all kinds of cool stuff, right? So we do versions of our characters. These are still some of the concepts, but we do versions of our characters that are also in like fighting form, right? So, okay. Anyways, so and we have animations and other things, but the other part of this is that. So this is what brings us to this story. So we have a version of DrBossKey that we did. And so the Larkin living lab cloak winds up encasing him kind of like a flight suit, right? And I really wanted to do these really neat, because Larkin also has the ability to channel forth these kind of bone elements and sinew and flesh. And I really wanted to have this really big, large in the life, magical kind of like almost, what do you call it? Like a Dracula, gothic, big wingy cloak, very much in that space. I really enjoy that. So, and I had fun, we had fun riffing on this. So we did this exploration, where we went through lots of iterations. And so now we're going to bring this aspect of Larkin into, and rough concept art, but into, I think, into the game, right? So that's the verses of that, a version of that. So, and there's also, so there are these other transformations, and we can be done here, but there's other transformations here, like for instance, we have these digigrade legs, right? Where then it's not a flight suit, but it's this like really cool, like running, like leaping, like it's very, like, you know, like I, don't get me wrong, I love Mega Man. There's inspiration. I've played so many games over my life. So some of these things, like there are like, I was like, oh, like while I was imagining things, I wasn't thinking about the game first, but then I was like realizing some of my imagination is certainly like I can draw parallels between these and other things conceptually. So it's very like like Mega Man blew my mind when I first played it as a kid, and you defeated the boss and you got the boss's weapon, right? Like there's some of that going on here for sure. So so we have all of these different forms that DrBossKey can take on. Here's a version of essentially he's got these sort of like these big mashing bone ridged like gauntlets, right? So and anyways, tons of stuff. I could sit here and talk about this for hours. We're sitting, like it's a lot of fun when you realize all the stuff that you wind up creating over the years and how it weaves together this kind of like tapestry in the story, that it really just feels a lot of what seems simple on the surface in terms of like the gameplay and the shmup and the characters, but it actually has a lot more to it. Now, the hard part, the trick, is trying to figure out cool ways to convey that make the world feel rich without being too heavy-handed. No one personally, for me, it's a bit ironic, but in games, the princess, sorry Mario, the princess is another castle is almost all that I need, as long as the world carries a part of that narrative. Like it's nice to have a little bit more sometimes, sure, but I don't need a lot. Gameplay is the most important thing to me first and foremost, right? And I think a lot of people forget that. Everyone loves games for different reasons. My way isn't necessarily the way, it's just the way that I want to craft my own game experiences. So, and when I consider adding a little bit more to the world to really start to flesh this out, I think that it's important to be restrained, but also to let people, if they want, that they can dig a little bit deeper, they can learn a little bit more, they can understand a bunch of things there. So we've been doing this for years at this point. But anyways, that's where a lot of this came from. I think it's quite bold and a little crazy, maybe, to change the player craft, after we've launched. But then I don't know. If we don't use it for Interstellar Sentinel, we'll use it for the follow-up game for sure. But I also, while I love the ship design is fantastic. We've done a lot of like great work on the ship, right? And as we played with it, and as we're doing more playtesting, it's not lost on me. It's a long ship. It needs to be tall because the part of the gameplay is the top, the mid, and the bottom weapon, right? This gameplay is very important. But the reality is the only thing that matters the most, I really want to have a ship that felt beefy. A lot of times ships and shmups, if they're really small against the enormity of the world, right? And I wanted to have just a little bit more than that, but I also wanted to have more gameplay based on the position of where your weaponry was and where the safe spot is in the ship design. And while I think a lot of this works for me, I also understand that it's harder for people, especially people outside of shmups, to connect with these concepts, right? And I think one of the reasons why Death Smiles, I think, also resonated really well and was a commercially successful game, was because people understand human anatomy. People can sort of say, oh, like, you can use your limbs to dodge a bullet, or like getting shot in the heart is really, or the head is like the ultimate weak spot, right? Like we just understand these things from our own tropes and tales, but also just what we understand from a most fundamental, what do you call it? It's like it's understood wisdom, right? I like to say this is like, these are these magic moments that happen. So you take Grand Theft Auto, right? Grand Theft Auto, fantastic game, giant sandbox world, feels like it's living and breathing, and you've got lots of agency, lots of things you can do. and then, you know, you're running around, you come out, you like leap out of a car, right? And then you decide you're gonna run down the, I don't know, like the sidewalk, and then you take a hard left across the road, and then sometimes you just get plowed by a car. God, it just plows you from the, you know, from off screen, and it knocks you down. Doesn't usually kill you, which is good, right? Because that'd be frustrating. But immediately, what do we do? We are modern humans. We automatically take the responsibility for not looking before we cross the road, right? So, and that's what you call learned wisdom, right? Like, I don't have to explain to you that a car might run you over if you cross the street without looking, because it's the world we live in. And, you know, and if I, as a game developer, game designer, decide that I want to teach you that you can get hit by cars, I'm missing something. And I'm also treating my players as they're not smart enough to understand those things. So rules and logic and systems that you design and want to teach for, especially if they're obtuse or they're things that people aren't familiar with, you have to teach those within reason. Like, you can go way too overboard in trying to set that up, but that's a different story, different video. But anywhere you can leverage human wisdom from experience, not necessarily just game experience, but real world, real life, real living anatomy experience, you know, the easier it is for players to relate and to start to intuit more of the rules of your game without you having to explain it all. All right. Anyways, if you made it this far, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody that's been following the channel. Thank you for all of the remarkable feedback. The game is doing fantastic. It is very humbling and an honor just to see it popping up. Like, I'm meeting people I never would have met, and it's because of this thing. You know, I do my daily Google searches, and I find another Twitch streamer that decided to check out the game, and they play, and then they record their video game playthrough, and then I get to watch that, and we get to talk about things. So, I don't know, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Anyways, thank you very much. Talk to you all soon.